I got a Daisy feeling. I got a Daisy feeling. Yeah.
What is going on, everybody? I'm Jabby Kuwait, joined by KRISTEN STEPHENSONPINO.
Hello.
We're watching the Unmaking of India. How the British impoverished the world's richest economy. The British.
Achara.
Oh, look, it says how Achara's people impoverished the world's richest economy. What? It's a typo. You guys, thanks so much for joining us. If you haven't done so already, hit the subscribe button, bell icon, all notifications, and vote this up. If you're not doing that, why you do?
Why you do?
No racist, bro. Earlier today on the live stream, someone said, "Don't honest, Jabby."
Don't honest. That's so good.
Also, make sure to subscribe to Odd Compass. There's a link in the description below. You can click on that link to give the original video an upvote and also subscribe to them from there. That's also the way to watch the video without our reaction if you'd rather do that. But anyway, who's counting? Let's go. I don't know what that means. I'm just saying things.
In the year 1700, India's share in the world's economy was an astounding 27%, more than all of Europe combined. 250 years later, India's share had dropped to less than 3%,
Why might
and
that
its
be?
people were left impoverished. What happened? Strap in,
Achara.
adventurers. We're about to dive into a dark and messy
Achara is
history.
what happened.
Achara's what happened.
Welcome to
It's her
18th
fault.
century India. In 1707 CE, the death of Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb sends the empire into a
That
decades-long
sounded like he was
spiral.
in the bathroom.
In his
Yeah.
wake, an endless parade of weak princelings forced themselves upon the peacock throne. With the Mughal Empire teetering on the brink of collapse, regional powers jostle for supremacy. Land grabs and title claims, infighting and betrayal. India is vulnerable. The situation is so precarious that in 1739, Persian Emperor Nadir Shah invades North India and sacks Delhi. During this period of disorder, the British sensed opportunity. Leveraging their unique advantages as a foreign power, they bribed and blasted their way into a dominant position in the subcontinent. India was no stranger to dealing with foreign aggression, but the British were not like those who had come before. They were not like Nadir Shah, who looted and simply left. Nor were they like the Huns, who, while shedding Gupta blood, became Indian themselves. Yes, the British were different, for they saw India as an inexhaustible gold mine whose resources were to be forever extracted.
Are you caught up? Are you keeping up, rather? Are you keeping up? Are you keeping up? There's a lot of stuff happening that's being
know.
thrown at me in these history
Yeah.
videos. Sometimes, like, I love the animation and the style and the enthusiasm in his voice.
Yeah.
But there's like so much data. I'm like, okay.
You gotta like slow down a bit.
I'm trying to keep it all in. I'm trying to because it's all important, right? 'Cause
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to do this in fast mode, which makes it even better.
And its people were left impoverished.
It makes you kind of
What
feel like
happened?
you're
Strap in, adventurers.
on
We're about to
overload.
dive into a dark and messy history. Welcome to 18th century India. In 1707 CE, the death of Mughal Emperor.
What is CE?
It's a.
Because I know BC and I know
know CE.
AD.
The death of Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb
Okay.
sends the empire into a decades-long spiral. In his wake, an endless parade of weak princelings forced themselves upon the peacock throne.
Now I'm getting it. I'm getting it. All right. So a lot of inheritors or people after him tried to control the throne after, and they were just not as good. They were terrible. They were terrible leaders. Kind of like. Am I allowed to say this? Well, let's just say that the next king of a certain country, was not as appreciated. I'm not talking about England. I'm talking about the other one. I'm just not allowed to say it out loud. You get what I'm saying? Are you following?
I'm not sure.
No, forget it. You're a lost cause anyway.
India is vulnerable. The situation is so precarious that in 1739, Persian Emperor Nadir Shah invades North India and sacks Delhi. During this period of disorder, the British sensed opportunity. Leveraging their unique advantages as a foreign power, they bribed and blasted their way into a dominant
I'm all
position
caught up
in the
now.
subcontinent.
Are you caught up?
India was no stranger to dealing with foreign aggression, but the British were not like those who had come before. They were not like Nadir Shah, who looted and simply left. Nor were they like the Huns, who, while shedding Gupta blood, became Indian themselves. Yes, the British were different, for they saw India as an inexhaustible gold mine whose resources were to be forever extracted. By the time India won its independence in 1947, its native institutions had been demolished, its economy deindustrialized, its trade networks severed, and its people more deeply divided by caste and creed.
Damn it,
In
Achara.
just 200 years of colonial rule, the India that once inspired the world was unmade. The halcyon days of India are over. She has been drained of all the wealth she once possessed, and her energies have been cramped by a sordid system of misrule. The deliberate bleeding of India by the British was so extreme that famed American scholar Will Durant referred to it as the greatest crime in all of history.
Wow.
So let's pull back the curtain and see what India was like before colonialism. In the 19th century, the American J.T. Sunderland wrote about the India that the British found when they arrived. India was a far greater industrial and manufacturing nation than any in Europe or Asia. Her textile goods were famous all over the civilized world. So was her exquisite jewelry and her precious stones. So was her pottery, her porcelains and ceramics. So were her fine works in metal,
Their
iron,
art.
steel, silver, and gold.
Spices.
She had great architecture, equal in beauty to any in the world. She had great merchants, businessmen, bankers, and financiers. She was not only a great shipbuilding nation, but had commerce and trade which extended to all civilized countries. That may seem like heavy-handed praise, but the record does show that pre-colonial India was a dominant manufacturing economy. Let's take a closer look at the textile, shipbuilding, and metalworking industries. India was a textile superpower for most of its long history. There were many textile centers in the subcontinent. Coastal Andhra was a block printing hub, for example, while Gujarat and Bengal were known for their high-end woven products. There was global demand for these items. In fact, India enjoyed a mind-blowing 25% share of the global textile trade by the mid-18th century. This thriving textile trade had knock-on effects for the entire economy. For example, the popularity of Indian textiles led to the creation of stable international distribution networks. By piggybacking on these networks, other Indian artisans could sell their goods worldwide at a reduced cost. As a result, many different industries flourished alongside the Indian textile industry. We know that international trade was conducted primarily along maritime routes, and so the Indian shipbuilding industry had developed into a behemoth too. A significant number of Indian ports were engaged in the shipbuilding industry: Dhaka, Mausalapatnam, Surat, Calicut, Quilon, and many, many others. Entire rural communities were involved in the production and processing of materials used to construct ships. Quality was paramount. Consider the Bengali merchant fleet in the early 17th century. The fleet consisted of nearly 5,000 ships, each capable of carrying up to 500 tons of goods. These ships were constructed in Bengali ports by native artisans who had the skills to craft elaborate wood, iron, and brass fittings. According to one British maritime observer, Indian vessels combine elegance and utility and are models of fine workmanship.
Wow.
Merchant contracts indicate that Bengali ships were much more durable than English ships.
Wow.
Bengali ships had an average lifespan exceeding 20 years, while English ships were not known to last more than 12. Quite a difference.
Oh my God.
India was a longtime pioneer in the global steel industry. As early as the 6th century CE, crucible-formed steel, which came to be known as Wootz or Damascus steel in the West, was being produced for export by Indian blacksmiths, particularly along the Malabar coast and in the Deccan. Arab and European officers regularly imported blades from India. While these blades were purchased as wartime implements, they were so robust and beautifully crafted that they also served as a mark of high status in times of peace. Though we've barely scratched the surface, it should already be clear that India was a manufacturing juggernaut, a thriving exporter of high-quality goods to markets throughout the world. How did the British manage to unmake all of that? The fundamental principle of the British has been to make the whole Indian nation subservient to the interests and benefits of themselves. And so, once the British took power, they changed the entire dynamic of the Indian economy to suit their own interests. The first step? Dismantling all native industry. To start, they established a legal monopoly over Indian textile goods and cut off the export market, which immediately disrupted long-standing trade links. Having now made themselves the exclusive buyers of Indian textiles, the British then changed the way that they paid for those goods. Instead of using foreign currency, they paid using the tax revenues extracted from India. The Indian economy stagnated and prices collapsed. Skilled artisans, who once fueled the vibrant Indian economic engine, were now significantly poorer and more restricted than ever before. And it didn't stop there. Soon enough, British manufacturers lobbied their government to completely eliminate the competition from the Indian textile industry. See, despite the restrictions imposed on Indian industry, British manufacturers were still finding it difficult to compete with Indian products. Company soldiers were sent to smash Indian looms.
Jesus.
According to several different accounts, they even went around breaking the thumbs of weavers so that they could no longer ply their trade. But that's not all. To ensure that the Indian textile industry could not recover, adapt, or innovate itself back into relevancy, the British imposed an absurdly harsh 80% tariff. This had
What?
an immediate catch-22 trap effect. Exporting goods from India to the UK was now economically unviable. But remember, Indians were restricted from selling to anyone else. Similar restrictions were imposed on nearly every branch of manufacturing in India. India was reduced to being a mere exporter of raw materials, like cotton and metal ore, so that the British could sell finished products back to Indians at a premium. We conquered India as an outlet for the goods of Britain. I'm not such a hypocrite to say that we hold India for the Indians. The colonial deindustrialization process was so complete that by 1947, only 0.7% of India was employed in any form of manufacturing. But skilled
Golly.
workers had to go somewhere, do something. The British monopoly on industrial production drove Indian artisans, merchants, builders, and others into agriculture en masse. In the words of Dr. Charles Hall, India's population has been thrown back upon the soil because Britain's discriminating duties have ruined every branch of native manufacture.
Okay, hold on. This is like painful. I need a second.
Yeah. This is so messed up.
They Walmarted
Wow.
the shit out of India.
No, they did worse than that. They're like 99 cents in them. They're taking away, like,
Well,
you can't
Walmart-
even be creative enough to like, you don't even have the funds to be creative anymore.
Right.
Like, that's like, they did worse than Walmart to them.
Walmart's notorious for going into small towns and just like buying up all the businesses, and then they're the only business in town. Which is
That's what you mean when you say Walmart. Okay,
yeah,
okay.
and so Brits kind of did the same thing where they became the only business, but then they like manipulated the system and such. It's like, okay, fine. Like that was all messed up. But then you're taking things even further
Yeah.
by destroying their machinery and
their
breaking their
people.
thumbs.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, now this is just pure evil. It was already bad, but now you've ventured into like that mustache twirling evil. You know what I mean? Golly, it's just too much.
Wages cratered to historical lows.
Just
And in
shows how
fact,
powerful
the land itself
they
could not
were.
sustain the influx of newly disenfranchised workers. Poor seasonal harvests and droughts gave way to catastrophic famines and mass poverty. With most Indians now converted into peasant cultivators, the British sought to exploit them further. They began to tax cultivators as the primary revenue source for the administration. Taxes were extreme, pegged at 50 to 80% of gross income, and calculated before the harvest.
Christ, that's
The
crazy.
result? Indian cultivators often owed more in taxes than they earned as income.
Oh my
The British
God.
knew how harsh this really was. They openly conceded that they were imposing the highest tax rates in the world, and that taxes were more than 3 times higher than they had ever been under Indian
Wow.
rulers. To add insult to injury, the British even bragged about it in Parliament. The Indians have been taxed to the utmost limit. Every province has been made a field for higher exaction, and it has always been our boast how greatly we have raised the revenue above that which the native rulers were able to extort. Colonial taxes were so burdensome that 2/3 of the population in directly ruled British areas fled to the hinterlands, where native Indian lords could at least minimally protect them from financial depredation. The millions who stayed behind could hardly afford to pay taxes, and the situation was worsened by the fact that the British did not negotiate tax payments. Horrors were perpetrated under the guise of sinless mathematical neutrality. Tax defaulters were confined in cages and exposed to the burning sun. Fathers sold their children to meet the rising rates.
God dang
Vulnerable
it, man.
peasants were physically tortured to pay up, and when they didn't have the means to pay, the British
heartbreaking.
confiscated their farmland for themselves. Tens of millions of landless peasants were created for the first time in Indian history. By the end of the 19th century, India was Britain's largest source of revenue by far, its largest purchaser of exports, and a source of highly paid employment for both British civil servants and soldiers, and they were all paid for by Indian taxes.
You know what's really crazy? If I'm not mistaken, Brits had let go of slavery before America did. And they had kind of like, lectured America like, hey, that you got to cut that shit out. Slavery is not cool. It's like, we got it from you. Obviously slavery is awful and it's wrong without there's no question there. It's just so weird that the same country lecturing America about slavery
Hypocrites.
was the same country doing all of this in the 19th century. It's like, this is awful. To me, this is on par with slavery. You're impoverishing people and not giving them a fighting chance at all. It's so fucked up.
Many British officials freely acknowledged the exploitative nature of the colonial enterprise. In fact, a Prime Minister of the UK, the Marquess of Salisbury, himself admitted, As India is to be bled of money, the lancet should be directed to those parts where the blood is congested. And just like that, India and its people were bled dry. The fundamental issue of British overlordship was the fact that the British had no intention to become one with the land or to rule it as their own. The British saw India as innately and eternally foreign, and this justified their creation and maintenance of what scholars have referred to as an extractive colony. For comparison's sake, consider the Turkic peoples who invaded India and eventually formed the Delhi Sultanate and the Mughal Empire. Look, the Mughals were no heroes. They imposed unequal taxes, engaged in religious discrimination, plundered local treasuries, visited great violence upon their enemies, and exhibited a Persianized racial arrogance. But one thing is clear. India's wealth was preserved at a foundational level. After nearly 2 centuries of Mughal rule, India was still a dominant economic power, responsible for 27% of global trade. There's a simple reason for that. See, the Mughals had a foreign place of origin, Fergana, but they did not repatriate India's resources to their original homeland. India may not have been Fergana, but it had become their new home, and so their loyalties and energies were owed solely to India. Meanwhile, the British ruled India as disconnected tyrants. The bulk of the revenue from India wasn't reinvested in India. No. It was extracted and repatriated to their distant, foggy homeland.
They tried to do that to us. No taxation without representation, bitch. Boston Tea Market, bitch. That's why we rebelled against the Brits and fought back and kicked them out. That's exactly how we got started. The Brits were trying to do the same thing. It's interesting to me that Canada and Australia still kind of sees Britain as the motherland. It's like...
It is interesting, isn't it? But I feel like they also kind of want that separation as well, though.
Who, Britain? Or the other countries?
No, the other countries. They do. Because, I mean, I've talked to other people about this before, and they're still kind of like, but they have to make peace with it, you know?
Yeah.
How much? Modern economists have estimated that the total amount of wealth that the British extracted from India is in the ballpark of $43 trillion.
God.
Yes, $43 trillion.
I feel it in my gut.
When taxes are not
I feel it in my stomach. That hurts.
Raised,
Jesus
they
Christ.
constitute an absolute loss and extinction of the whole amount withdrawn from the taxed country. The money might as well be thrown into the sea. Such is the nature of the tribute we have so long exacted from India. Apologists for colonial rule often point to the railways as some sort of extravagant counter to the argument of extraction and divestment. But as modern scholars have pointed out, the railways serve as evidence for how exploitative and inefficient British investment in India really was. First, there's the bold assumption that Indians would not have built railways, like the Japanese or others, either by importing the technology or by developing their own. India had been far too advanced and cutting edge of civilization to not keep up had it been given the opportunity to do so. When the British came to India, the country was the leader of Asiatic civilization. Japan was nowhere. Now, in 50 years, Japan has revolutionized her history with the aid of modern arts of progress, and India, burdened by 150 years of English rule, is condemned to tutelage.
That's a little bit of an oversimplification, but I see the point he's making.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, with Japan, we stopped them from doing shit. We went in there with 2 atomic bombs and said, stop. No. There's a debate about the morality of that. I'm not here to get into that. All I want to say is like some of the facts, which is we told Japan to stop. Japan stopped. The emperor came out for the first time. No one had ever seen him before. He signed a declaration to drop arms. And then Japan had to pivot, and they became a flourishing nation of technology. It's just a bit of an oversimplification. That's all I wanted to point out. But I mean, I still get what he's saying. There is the assumption being made that India wouldn't have discovered that on its own and found a way to that technology on its own, which it very well could have. For all intents and purposes, it very well has, because without any help, really, India has found its way forward with advancing. I mean, they've built the most financially efficient space agency in the world, as far as I can tell. They're flying to the moon for the pennies compared to what we have flown to the moon with, right? And so the innovation that India has shown demonstrates that India very well could have found their way forward and been a lot further ahead right now had it not been for British interference. It's complicated, you know. If it wasn't Britain, someone else might have interfered, and who knows how else history could have played out.
But let's ignore that for now. Initially, the Indian Railways were positioned as a grand investment scheme for British shareholders. The government guaranteed substantial returns of at least 5% per year. And when the revenues were not enough to pay out these returns, Indian taxpayers covered all the losses. Because of these taxpayer-backed guarantees, construction of the railways was extremely inefficient. Here's a fun stat. Every mile of Indian rail cost £18,000 to construct, as compared to £2,000 for the same mile built in the United States.
What?
All the elements of railway construction, steel, wagons, gears, engines, and more, were produced by British manufacturers. Indians weren't even given an opportunity to produce their own manufactured alternatives because the British government imposed restrictions that prevented Indians from
How
competing.
are you?
Hey, you know what's funny?
How are you? Like, how do people? How? Everything I want to say is really ugly right now.
This is actually going on right now
I'm trying to
between China and Africa. It's happening right now.
Dude, I don't.
You want to direct your anger? Direct it right there. That's the one thing about videos like this. It's like
You can't. There's certain things you have to be careful with what you say, you know.
Yeah.
But then there's that. I'm just gonna shut up because I'm gonna end up going through a black hole and I'm not gonna be able to get out.
You're gonna get canceled.
I'm gonna get canceled.
Still, the essential purpose
people
of the
are
railways
so-
was to assist the British enterprise in the exploitation of the natural resources of India. In fact, the railways made it possible for the British to export enormous amounts of grain and other agricultural products, which sparked and exacerbated famines. Over the course of British rule in India, an estimated 35 million preventable deaths were caused by famines. That's millions more than those killed under Stalin or Mao, and that's 5 times more than the Holocaust.
Damn.
The British were directly responsible for this. They mass exported Indian foodstuffs to Britain and other countries in Europe, even during drought periods. Food in India became too expensive for peasants to afford. According to Dr. Charles Hall, India starves so that its annual tax revenue to England may not be diminished by $1. There is plenty of grain in India. The trouble is that the people have been ground down till they are too poor to buy it. The British had no interest in provisioning for Indian lives. Famine non-intervention
They just don't
was
give two shits
official
about
government
anybody
policy.
except themselves.
How ironic, given that heavy-handed British intervention and market manipulation is what sparked the famines in the first place. And when good people, Indians and foreigners, worked together to help famine-affected peasants, the British government made efforts to stop them. They were furious that the government's own failures were being highlighted. Don't believe me? Listen to this British officer in his own words. Scores of corpses were tumbled into old wells because the deaths were too numerous for the relatives to perform funeral rites. Mothers sold their children for a single meal. Husbands flung their wives into ponds to escape the torment of seeing them perish from hunger. But amid these scenes of death, the British government in India was unmoved. Newspapers were persuaded into silence. Strict orders were given to civilians. Do not acknowledge that civilians are dying of hunger. And if you think that Indians would have done a worse job,
Don't acknowledge it. How do you not acknowledge something like that?
Because you're heartless.
How do you not acknowledge? I don't understand why people are so damn cruel and why we live in this world that just sucks. I mean, there's great stuff too. However, I don't understand the greed because there's enough of everything, like resources worldwide, for us to go around. And if we would just trade and do play nice.
That's not how empires are built.
Yeah, but why do you need an empire?
I don't know.
That's the point. Well, why do you need that?
I don't know. That's just not how empires are built. Empires are built through an iron hand.
I don't understand the hunger for power. These are live people that all these people they give two shits about.
Yeah.
And this happens throughout history, nonstop, time and time again. And it's just kind of baffling and shocking to always and you know it's there.
Yeah.
You know it's happening. It still happens now. Yeah. And you're kind of haven't we learned yet? This is fucked up.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You tell him, white lady.
Hold on. First off, I am the biggest mutt you will ever meet. Oh, this is the lightest it's been in a while. That's okay.
I'm just messing with you. I'm just trying to lighten the mood at the same time.
I know,
Yeah.
but
Okay, anyway.
And if you think that Indians would have done a worse job, consider this. There hasn't been a single large-scale Indian famine in the 70-plus years since British rule ended. Not one. Independent India has its flaws, but it has been overwhelmingly better at providing for the care, safety, and prosperity of its own people. And now you know.
Damn. That was thorough.
Yeah. That was actually that was broken down really well. I like the way he did it. It's interesting. You learn. I really, really like that. Normally, like sometimes when you have videos like this, they can be like really...
A slog.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this one was actually very like at first you're kind of like you feel overwhelmed because you're like, wow, this is a lot of information to take in. I don't know if I'm following or if I can follow. And then all of a sudden you kind of get into it. And then you're like, all right, I see you.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, not enjoyed, that's the wrong word. I felt like it was informative because like I understand that the Brits came in and did damage. And it was so bad that it impoverished a lot of people. And, you know, I have just a general idea, and I understand a general feeling as to how cruel the Brits could be. Like there would be places where British people would hang out, and there would be signs that say, and in India, okay, there would be signs that would say, no dogs and no Indians allowed. Like that's how they looked at them, was like under their boot. Like that's how low they thought of Indians. You know, obviously seeing Brits portrayed in film, in older films, not older films, but films talking about that time period. Like I have a strong sense as to the general idea, but that scope of just how much, you know, there's a video by a guy named Shashi Tharoor that kind of details those ideas, but to see with the visual cues, like, what is what and what, like how it all kind of progressed, and just the volume of $40 trillion, you know, being plundered from India for your homeland, and you're just taking and taking and taking and taking, and like it's oh man, I don't know how you can feel okay. And so, you know, Winston Churchill is seen as a hero in England, but he's seen as a tyrant and as an evil person in India. You know, same in Ireland. It's interesting. Like I wish Indians and Irish people would talk because they have a lot of common, a lot in common. In particular, their frustrations with Britain. But anyway, that's besides the point. Yeah, I thought it was quite informative and well put together. The only part that kind of messed me up was the beginning because it was like fast. I'm like, whoa, okay, hold on. I got the first cent. It's almost like someone told you their phone number and you got the first digit. You know what I mean? That's how it felt. But after that, like I was caught up and I was following it very, very well. It's sad.
It's really sad.
Yeah. But the upside is that, you know, India's fighting back hard and doing, you know, they're on the ascent. And they're primed to own that spot that has been, I guess you could say, coveted, not coveted, but whatever that spot is that's been held by China for a long time, the enviable spot. I think India's primed to take that spot on the global theater, because India's primed to become. Yeah, they're primed to become a huge exporter, bigger than China, I feel like.
I think so too, though.
Yeah, Apple's already starting to shift their manufacturing to India. And from what I understand, the only thing in the way from completely shifting to India is like certain international laws that Apple has to adhere to. But otherwise, I would imagine that they would just shift all of production there, because you have a lot of smart people in India. And so, anyway, cool. I like Achara a little bit less now.
I still love you, Achara. It's not your fault.
It's all your fault. It's bad. Your dad took $40 trillion from India.
He didn't. He was a baby.
He was a baby.
This is why whenever I hear people like have a fascination over the English accents, I'm like, fuck you. American accents are cool. Get out of here with your stupid English accents.
Are
Yes.
they?
People love the cowboy accent. People love the New York accent.
You don't have a cowboy accent.
Yes, we do. The Texans have a cowboy accent. New York.
I know, but you don't.
What are you talking about?
I'm just saying. You ain't got them swing.
No, I got my LA accent.
Y'all don't even know.
I was hanging out at one of my favorite bars the other day, and some Indian NRIs came in. I was considering, I was entertaining the notion of doing a video on this.
Okay.
Because I was so irritated with them. But some English NRIs came in to my favorite bar, and I tried to chat them up, and non-resident Indians. I tried to chat them up and whatever, only to discover just how removed most of this group is from India and how little shits they give about like India and Indian film and all that stuff because they're so pompous and British and whatever. I'm just like, I just want to fucking punch you in the chin. I hate you and your accent. I was just so mad. I was so pissed. And so what happened was, I was with a friend. I told you this.
Yeah,
I was with a
know
friend.
the story.
I was like, yo, we got to go over there where those two hot girls are at. And he's like, how do we do that? I go, like this. And I got up and I walked over there. I'm like, can we join you? And they're like, sure. He came with me. We sat down. We're talking to the two girls. And all the Indian guys were like,
They're like,
huh?
Maybe we should be friends with you.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, you know the pretty girls?
Y'all could have gotten laid with some cute American women. Instead, you're over there with your little sausage fest. So anyway,
You got his feelings hurt.
lesson of the day. If you're an NRI and you come across Jamming Kuwait,
Say hi back.
be nice. I don't know where I'm going with this. I guess all I'm saying is the stupid English accent annoys me, and just insofar as people's fascination with it, it's like whatever. It's just an accent. It's not that big of a deal. Look what they did. Stop praising them. They're not that cool.
No, but their flag looks pretty cool.
And they just sound smart, but they're not actually smarter. You guys, thanks so much. And Jai Hind. I don't know how to conclude this. It's such an awkward video.
It is awkward. It's like, it's uncomfortable, like, it's a hard topic.
Yeah.
And it's messed up. I'm sorry.
On that note, I'm Jabby Kuwait. This is
KRISTEN STEPHENSONPINO.
Peace out. It's all your dad's fault, Achara.